Greetings friends, welcome back to our digital workflow. In the previous episode, we launched into Lightroom and got a look at some of the raw files from our swoopy Aspen artwork. In this episode, we're gonna go into Photoshop and start building out a beautiful panoramic oil painting. Let's get started. All right, friends, let's get right back into it. Now, let's do a quick recap. We started off in Lightroom, where we created these really interesting, unique, super colorful, saturated Aspen surrealistic images. Again, this is accomplished by sort of moving the camera, panning the camera up and down as you aim at an aspen forest. There's no real right or wrong formula for doing this. You just kind of have to shoot a lot of these in camera and come up with what you like the best. This is a couple of sort of streaking shots that I captured during our last photo expedition for fall colors. And so I feel like we have some pretty interesting raw materials to work with here when we move these files over into Photoshop. Okay, let's do just that. I have already exported these to a specified location, and now I want to open all of these images up in Photoshop. So, File, Scripts, load files into Stack. And as I browse, I've already targeted the folder that has all of these freshly exported raw files. We'll open these up, click OK, and Photoshop will open all 4 of my interesting looking aspen trees in one single document. Now again, since I'm kind of a panoramic crazy person, I'm going to put these into a pano. Because again, I feel like that expansive wide aspen forest just kind of really works beautifully for the panoramic format. So let's increase our canvas size first so we can sort of spread these images out and get a look at how they feel all working together. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select kind of a neutral color, going in here with kind of a dark yellow orange, and I'm going to create a new layer, call it background, and then we'll just use our paint bucket tool, fill the background with this neutral color, and I'm going to drag it to the back. This way I'm no longer dealing with this sort of checkerboard grid system that Photoshop gives us. I find this to be incredibly distracting when I'm working on a multi-panel image like this, so I just kind of like to cover it up with a neutral color from the background. You don't have to do this, it's really just a matter of preference from me. All right, let's get a look at what these guys kind of look like together here. So we have 2 images. I know that we have 2 images that are relatively similar. These 2 on top here were definitely shot from completely different locations. Even though they are all aspen trees, they're starting to look a little bit different, which is nice. So I'm gonna hide him, and I'm gonna hide this one as well. I know that these 2 images over here in the layers palette are almost the exact same aspen grove. I can tell a lot of similarities between these 2. So I don't know that we need both of these. I'm just going to arbitrarily turn this guy off. And should we need a little bit of extra material down the line, I think we can bring him back on and use him to kind of patch a few things up. All right, so I now have sort of 3 images in my canvas that I can use to build out a pretty cool looking composition. Now, the way I see things first and foremost is that this image has a lot of strong vertical elements, a lot of big, thick, heavy trees coming right down the center. So if I put him on this side, and then I have all of these other kind of smaller aspen trees over off to this side, I think that we're gonna have a bit of a unbalanced composition. So what I wanna do is I want to put this guy right down the center, and I'm gonna flank him with our other 2 aspen series. This should kind of give us sort of a heavy center weighted compositional shape with sort of streaks coming out on the outer side. All right, now again, I'm looking over here and I want to balance my equation as best I can. So I feel like what I want to do is reverse this image right here so that these kind of stronger trees are more on the border and that these little baby trees are more in the inside. Again, this is just more or less an arbitrary decision at this point, so I'm going to take this, I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and I'm going to flip this horizontal. And basically what that did is it just flipped the image horizontally. So now my thicker, heavier trees are on the outside, my little baby trees are on the inside, and I can use that to kind of better balance out this exposure equation here. Alrighty, so I've got my sort of big guy. We're gonna call this one center. I'm gonna call this left, and I'm gonna call this right, so that I kind of keep these straight. Basically what I want to do is I just want to combine these images so that they sort of look like they belong together. I've got all of these cool looking streaks going out through here, but I do want to kind of maintain somewhat equal sizes with regard to my aspen trees here. So let's kind of maybe, I don't know, edge this one in over here. And I like the way all of this looks over this way, although I do have this tree that sort of breaks off into a bit of a pitchfork or a tuning fork or a wishbone right here. I'm pretty sure that's the same tree right there. I shot this scene sort of multiple times, and I think that one tree kind of got in the same frame, although even though they do kind of look very dissimilar now that we're seeing them in mirror image version, they do kind of look a little bit clone stampy. So let's make sure that we only use one of these sort of tuning fork or pitchfork trees here. So let's just grab this guy on the right. We'll snuggle him in, I don't know, kind of somewhere in there. All right, that gives us pretty marginally even streaks. I've got some nice big strong trees on the outside. I've got some bunch of big strong trees on the inside. And all I really want to do, I mean, these images kind of all came together rather nicely, but I do kind of want to paint them in with a little bit of masking, and so that I can kind of blend them into one big giant kind of blurry paint streak. So really all I have to do is go up to my center here, and I'm going to put a mask on him. I'm going to go to my brush tool. I'm going to switch to black paint, and I'm going to come up at 100%, and I'm just going to, actually, let's go ahead and bring some guidelines in. So this is the perimeter of our center image, just so I kind of know where to paint. Let's go back to our mask, and then just sort of start painting him out, so that we reveal the two layers underneath. I'm gonna maybe not do 100%. Let's go down to maybe 60% so that some of these images can kind of blur together a little bit. It looks kind of cool like that, sort of. I don't know, again, it's relatively arbitrary how we do this, kind of like that initial tree right there. That looks cool. We go over to this side. Now, I really, really, really love this portion of the image. I think that's a really, really cool looking, just bright orange streak that goes into these dark streaks right here. So as I paint this out, I might want to look for another portion of the overall composition where I can bring that back to life. Let's just see here. Again, as I paint, let's see here, back on my mask, switch to black paint, and as I paint him out, yeah, I'm already starting to miss him. I think he's really cool, and I'm seeing my sort of tuning fork tree come in here a little bit extra. So let's bring him back in just enough. Maybe we'll zoom in over here. Let's kind of lose the guidelines. And as you can see, I really would like to keep as much of him as I possibly can. So back to black paint. And we'll just sort of ease off over here, because I just love that really strong orange streak that comes down and it dissolves into these beautiful other kind of darker aspen trees in the distance there. So again, trying to preserve some of our favorite parts. This is all very arbitrary, and these images do come together rather beautifully because it's just a bunch of vertical streaks. And as you can see, just in a few quick little moments, I think we've got a pretty cool looking pano on our hands. Let's maybe make this guy a little bit smaller. I don't know that he needs to be quite so big. Let's grab our right side, and I can kind of move the right side in and out a little bit. Make him just a little bit smaller like that. We'll come in here. Alright, and maybe I'll add some of this back in here. Now if I add too much, I'm going to go all the way to the border of that image and create this really strong, sharp line right there. I don't want that, so let's mask that back out. But again, we are basically combining a bunch of vertical lines together. It's going to be relatively difficult for our audience to tell where one image ends and where another image begins. Let's dial back that a little bit. Soften that section there. All right, that looks pretty cool. As I come over here, I can't really tell where these guys come together. Maybe we'll turn my middle layer off. So I do have really a lot of kind of bright color information that I can use underneath here. Bring this guy back on. And maybe we'll move him over a little bit more. And back to my mask, and let's paint this section out just a little bit so we can kind of celebrate some of these beautiful little streaks in behind. I like that. Gets a little more orange in there. Over here. Okay, again, a lot of this is just very, very arbitrary. Let's move our right layer over just a little bit. That looks good like that. And all right, well, without getting too insanely artsy-fartsy, maybe we'll come in here. We'll kind of crop that down a little bit. And call that pretty darn cool. Now I have this sort of beautiful swooping Aspen painting that I didn't really work all that hard for. No need to really sharpen any of this because it's all just a bunch of blurry stuff going by anyway. Let's see if we can maybe come up here, bring in some curves adjustments and increase sort of the brightness of these central trees, because these central trees are not really 100% matching the brightness of our exterior trees. This will all make sense in just a minute. So let's call this, oopsie, bright. And I'm going to do a Command I to reverse that mask. And basically what I want to do is I want to paint brightness into these central trees here because they look a little bit gray by comparison to these bright white aspens on the outside. So I don't want gray in the middle and white on the outside. Let's just see if we can do that. I don't know. We'll zip this down a little bit. And I will try to paint some extra bright white into my central trees here. Put a little there, a little here, a little there. Change the brush size, make it look a little bit kind of free-flowing and organic. So if I hold down the shift key and I just kind of go straight up, it draws a perfectly straight line, which is sort of kind of cool. But again, we want to make this look a little bit more organic than that. So I'm just painting streaks until these trees look like they're about as white as the other ones. And just with a few quick brush strokes, I think we may have kind of pulled it off. All right, and so I don't know if this floats your boat or not. I think this stuff is really kind of cool. I love these sort of abstract looking images. I think they look great when they're kind of hung up in a gallery or sort of in an artistic space. Let's go ahead and throw a quick curves adjustment on here. We will really increase the contrast and it will make the colors just pop out even more and help to satisfy our desire for all of this beautiful, strong color saturation. Again, that's probably overdoing it a little bit, so we could dial back to, I don't know, maybe call it 60% on that last curves adjustment. But as we can see, in just a few short clicks, I mean, we don't have to be a master painter in order to create what I would consider to be some fairly unique artwork. Let's look at this in full view, zoom in a little bit, kind of make that take over the whole screen. Now, I could imagine that hanging up in a nice high-end mansion or a household somewhere. It's just a really cool looking, calming image. It has a lot of beautiful abstract qualities. I mean, that is an aspen forest. There's kind of no doubt about it. And once you explain that to the viewer, people can be like, oh my gosh, you're right. That's really wonderful. I had no idea. So again, we've essentially just blended a whole bunch of unique colors together. We have a really good representation of green and orange and red. And of course, these beautiful bright white streaking aspen trunks coming through the center of our composition. So if you need to get a little bit artsy-fartsy for your next photo expedition, this is a pretty cool way to spend a rainy day. Maybe you don't have access to the big ticket mountains. So go into the woods, play around with your camera a little bit, see what you can come up with. Alrighty, that's gonna do it for this episode. I hope you had fun on our little artistic adventure, and we will see you in the next lesson.